Lumpy's Alvin Goes to Pieces is the first segment of the 23rd episode of the first season of My Friends Tigger and Pooh, and this one is really sweet. I was also really curious as I had no idea how they were going to resolve this problem. Buster gets hold of Lumpy's alligator toy, Alvin, and unfortunately, he rips a giant hole into him. And the super sleuths have to try and find a way to fix Alvin before Lumpy finds out and before Lumpy gets hurt by the fact that his favourite toy has potentially been destroyed. And I was genuinely curious about how they were going to fix him. Now, I'll be honest, I feel like there is an easy fix to this, and it never really worked out. I feel like they could have just sewn the alligator back together, or at least found some extra fabric. What they ended up doing was maybe slightly like that. I mean, not really, to be honest. I will discuss in a moment with a spoiler warning what they ended up doing. But I feel like just sewing the toy back together or finding fabric to cover the hole and sewing it. Of course, encouraging sewing in a kids' show with a sharp needle might not have been the best approach. But either way, I feel like the most logical solution wasn't ever really presented here. Nevertheless, they try various things, such as going to Piglet to draw an alternative to Alvin and going to Rabbit with some very creative ideas there. And they realise that they just can't fix the toy. And I think that that in itself is maybe a good message, because sometimes toys are just broken beyond repair. I imagine that, in fact, as somebody who had a dog who did like to chew up soft toys when he was a puppy, sometimes the toys can get destroyed beyond repair. So I guess that in itself was a good thing to mention, that they couldn't just automatically fix the toy. A good lesson there maybe for children to keep their favourite toys out of reach of the puppies. But I still think that just based on the visual of the alligator, I think they probably could have found a more practical way of fixing him. But nevertheless, what they end up doing is actually quite good. And Lumpy's response is everything. So I will, from now, with a spoiler warning, talk about what happens at the end, because I think that this is actually really important. They realise that they can't completely repair Alvin, they can't find a replacement for Alvin, so they decide to tie a bow around his back, which, as I said, is ever so slightly like my suggestion of sewing in some replacement fabric. They're not really sewing it, but they do cover the hole up with some fabric in the form of the bow, and they give Alvin to Lumpy, and Lumpy hugs Alvin and is absolutely fine. It doesn't bother him at all that Alvin is like this now, and this is because he will love Alvin no matter what. And that's the message there, that it's important, if you love somebody, to love them no matter what, even if they suddenly have a giant hole in their back. And I think that that's a sweet message. In reality, I don't think it would work out that way. I can't imagine many children, and I include myself as a child in this, would see a favourite toy ripped apart and just think, oh well, I love it anyway. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe most children will, but I, like a lot of children, was very emotionally attached to my soft toys. If anything happened to my favourites, I imagine I would be quite devastated. I'd get over it eventually, but maybe not as quickly as Lumpy did. Either way, though, it is a sweet episode. I don't think they came to the most practical conclusion, but maybe within the context of the characters and their ages. Well, I don't actually know how old they're meant to be, but I assume that they're meant to be around Christopher Robin's age. In fact, I'm going to Google that. I googled it. The top result said that Pooh Bear is 1 year younger than Christopher Robin. That is literally just the first result. I haven't looked further than that. The point is, I think they're meant to be quite young. They're not fully grown adults. In fact, we know they're not fully grown adults because of things that happen with Christopher Robin as he starts to grow up. And obviously sewing, maybe not the best, but nevertheless, they do come up with a reasonable solution that I think actually is probably the second best option. And I think it worked quite well. Very sweet episode. I think emotionally quite relatable if you grew up loving soft toys. And ultimately, a pretty fun, very sweet story.